Hello everybody, this is a video about business case solving and presentation of business cases. The main point that I'm trying to make here is that solving a case and presenting a case is something very, very different. That's also indicated by this image below. So depending on how you look at things, they actually turn out to be very, very different. And that's basically the main message that I would like you guys to keep in mind. So the structure of these 6 videos is actually twofold. So in the first part, we will look at the green arrows, which is basically developing a solution. So what is the thinking process that we have to go through to develop an outstanding solution? And after we have developed the solution, we actually have to start a second process, coming up with how to present these ideas or these suggestions so we actually achieve the buy-in from the jury. And as I have mentioned on the title slide, I believe the two processes are quite different. Yes. So in your thinking process to develop the solution, you have to go through certain analysis, certain steps, use certain models. But the jury is not really interested in the process, how you get there. They're really interested in what it means for them. And the 3 pictures in the middle basically indicate that we can look at the same thing from different angles. Yes, we can look at them from the angle how you got there, so that's basically the green arrow, the green process, but that's not really interesting for most of the jurors. So I strongly recommend that you force yourself to go through the blue process, and during the blue process you actually develop the presentation, how you're going to convince the jury that your suggestion is the one suggestion that they should be following. I mentioned we are going to have 6 videos, so these would be those 6 videos. So in the first video we look at data collection, analysis of the data, then how we might come up with the solution. Third video looks at examples. Then we shift to the presentation process or creating the presentation. And I will argue that maybe we need something like an opening, management summary, and insight. Then video number 5 is about the actual suggestions, so short-term suggestions, long-term suggestions. And video number 6 introduces how we can summarize everything into financials, risks, mitigation and implementation, as well as Q&A, some comments about Q&A. So let's start with part 1, which is the data collection and broad analysis part of how we solve the case. So how do we come up with an outstanding solution? I believe that if we look at the thinking process for data collection, we must focus on 4 areas. The first area would be financials on the upper left side, and here are some recommendations what we might be looking at. Things like revenue, sources, cost, employees, equity, ownership, things like that. And of course that by itself doesn't provide much insight. Nevertheless, it will allow to tailor our solutions later. So let's say number of employees, maybe we come up that we would like to talk to our customers individually. And then if we look at the number of customers that we have versus the number of employees, we might see if that is possible with the current level of employees or if we need to hire additional employees. So this is basically finding facts. Yes. In addition to these very financial facts, we maybe should also look on the right side at the value proposition for the customer. And the questions here that we might want to look into are things like which business segments is the case, the company of the case active in, which industries is it active in, is it more B2C, is it more B2B? And again, we will later use models which are more tailored to B2C or more tailored to B2B. Key customer segments, customer buying decisions, maybe per customer segment. And also things like marketing, AIDA meaning attention, interest, desire, action. The reason being, I believe marketing is a very important part of every case suggestion that is required to convince the jury. And that's why marketing enjoys a little bit of high importance here. Then number 3 would be the actual value creation. What is the production process? What do we make? What do we buy? So what are the key suppliers? Also level of automation, efficiency. Efficiency basically means, do we depend on high volumes, or can we suggest customer-specific, customer-tailored solutions? Again, that's a key differentiator. So if we later come up with very customer-oriented solutions and we are more on the efficiency level, maybe we need to partner with somebody who can bring on such a customer-tailored element, or we need to add services which make our standard product more customer-tailored. So a level of flexibility, age, structure of the machines. So these are things that we collect now, and maybe they influence our suggestions a little later. And last but not least, we have a box that is called other aspects that we might look into as a data collection process. And these elements might be depending on the case to a certain extent, like key stakeholders such as the regulation, NGOs. So if you talk about banks today, regulation is a huge topic, for instance, or also things like latest developments, things like mergers, for instance, pharmaceutical industry. A lot of research and development is actually bought by buying companies. Research and development is only partially done internally. A lot of ideas are bought by acquiring a spin-off from a university, for instance. And of course, risk is also an important topic. Again, it depends a little bit on the industry, but overall, that is a very important topics. And last but not least, that's the green sentence at the end. We also need to see if there are some kind of no-goes or special focuses, special emphases that the case is requiring. So these would be some examples, some details example of what we just mentioned, some financial ratios that we could specifically look at. I personally like ABC analysis, for instance. ABC analysis is something, ABC analysis is something that I really, really like. Yes, so that gives us a very fast overview of like products that are very strategic, like a product, and things that are maybe not so strategic, yes, but also things like inventory turnover. These are ratios that indicate how fast we can actually serve our customers. Yes. Next, you might also want to look into the financial statements. Here we could talk about the vertical analysis. So in the vertical analysis, what we're basically doing is we are looking at, let's say, 3 years, and we are saying total assets is 100%, and then we basically look at which asset position holds what percentage of assets. And here we would see on the top line that actual cash came down from 30% down to 17%. So what does that mean? It basically means that over the last 3 years, the company decreased the cash basis, which basically means that today they have less cash to flexibly change or flexibly innovate from within. Instead, they need outside money first before they can innovate. The same for liabilities. All the liabilities are set to 100%. And then again, if you look at the top line, that's payables, we can see that the payables is increasing significantly, more than doubling. So that might be an indication that they have more payables. They depend more on the suppliers. They have outsourced some of their production steps to suppliers, and now they are more dependent on payables. We can do the same thing for the revenues. So the revenues are 100%, and then we can see what the different cost elements are. And for cost of goods sold, the second line here, we can see that it used to be 55%, now it's 73%, which can also be an indication that we use more automation or we use more suppliers. We buy higher priced components from the supplier instead of producing ourselves. Alternatively, we can use the horizontal analysis. So here, the different lines, how the different positions developed in year 2 and 3. And there, we would, for instance, see that the receivables went up significantly. So that's the second line. That might be an indication that we've been selecting the wrong customers. Customers, they don't pay as much. Inventory, that's also a very worrisome if we produce more inventory. The question is why? Have we changed our seasonal structure, for instance, which would justify such an increase in inventories? But more than doubling the inventories is hard to argue. So here it might be an indication that we have a problem. We produce too much and don't sell enough. Also, the cost of goods sold down here, there is an increase of 190%, or an increase of 90% as a matter of fact, but the revenue increased only by 43%. So that's a clear indication that the growth in cost, production cost, is not in line with the revenues. So a certain ratio here got way out of hand. So in summary, this company doesn't look that good. Other ratios that we could look at, or other analysis that we could look at, are things like industry trends. So technologies, production could be one of them. So the upper left is actually the development in TV technologies. And this was the time how fast the blue line, how fast traditional TV sets disappeared and how fast the LCD screens came into market. And the green line, other technologies, they never took off. So such trends could be used to indicate what trend we can expect for our case, for the industry or for the product that the case is talking about. And then obviously we can use these traditional trends to project in which direction we should be heading. Another analysis that we might want to use is basically the comparison of fixed cost, variable cost, and sales. So the blue line is the fixed cost, the red line is the variable cost or the total cost, and the green line is the sales. Yes, so left side, we have small fixed cost, high variable cost, which basically means we are very flexible, which means that we can reach break even fast, but our profit share is relatively small for each additional item sold. If you are in a mass market, then the right graph might be more interesting, which is basically saying that we have high fixed costs, small variable costs, so high level of automation, which moves break even out. But once we did reach break even, we are actually having a really, really high profit share for each additional item sold. Learning curve would be something that we can consider if we talk about the case where we have a new product. Then we can try to find learning curves of similar products and therefore project what the cost savings or the efficiency increases are. In very rare cases, we basically have the situation that the whole market changes. Such big cases are seldom, but they are possible. So here we could argue how in other cases or for other technologies, the supply and demand of the whole industry changed. And then the market point changed from the blue point to the violet point. Now, last but not least, on the right-hand side, we could try to analyze, try to collect data, what the industry is, or how the industry is developing. So this is basically a model that is indicating that every industry, every company, every technology go through certain cycles. And for each of the cycles, it's actually 4 cycles, as it's here. It's introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. Maturity and decline. And for each of these cycles, we might have different aspects that we need to consider for those objectives. In this case, it's the marketing objectives. So such comparison help us to really understand where our case company is at for the time being. So with the data collection, so the first arrow we can tick off now. After data collection, we understand the company in detail. Yes, what does it offer? What does it stand for the company, for the customers, and how does it make the customers happy? Which basically leads us to our next step, the broad analysis. In the broad analysis, now we are basically opening our view a little bit and look into something where the company or the case could be growing, could be going. So 30% of our thinking is about new elements. And again, 4 overarching ideas that we can use. So the first is, what is the actual question of the case? Yes, is the case about how we can grow revenue? Is it how we can cut costs? How we can grow customers? How we can expand internationally? Or is it, in rare cases again, is it more about what strategic options we have? So that's a fundamental question. And this basically leads us then into the direction, where can we take the case? Yes, what ideas are in scope of the actual case question, and which ideas are out of scope? To then get some creativity, we might want to look into trends in the industry. Yes, what are new customers? What is the new behavior of old customers or the new customers? Maybe what are new customer segments? For instance, refugees in schools at the moment. That's a new customer segment, if you wish. Yes, also new revenue options like in-app sales subscriptions. We see subscriptions on smartphones for digital offerings. Maybe we can take that idea into our non-digital offering. Of course, it requires some creativity and some conviction how we can do that. But at the moment, we're just looking if there is such a trend in our industry. New products, new product feature, or things like social media engagement, additional services, which is loosely related to the actual core product. Yes. Number 3 would be left bottom, hot topics in the industry or in related industry. And typically it's very, such discussion can be very technology oriented, like big data, artificial intelligence, and so on. You see all those buzzwords written there. Yes. Now, importantly, you have to argue these ideas from a customer perspective and not from a technology perspective. So what does 3D printing mean for the customer? It basically means maybe a little bit slower production process, but it's on demand, it's individual, it's what he actually needs as of now, right now. Yes. And last but not least, there might also be constraints. Some constraints might come from the case itself. So the board has given some directives or regulations or things like key partners that narrow the options that we have to move forward. And last but not least, ethics, sustainability, or other self-imposed rules. Especially sustainability is a key topic as of now, which might guide a little bit or narrow what we can actually do. Great. So again, let's look into some ideas here. So if we talk about analysis, creativity, I think one of the guiding principles should be that any business model that we look at or that we envision should lead to stable cash flows and stable profits. Yes. And of course, we have some positive examples and some negative examples. Let's start with SAP Cloud. SAP Cloud is a positive example in the sense that it yes. SAP Cloud is a positive example because SAP used to be license-based, so companies needed to buy a new license every 3 to 5 years. So every 3 to 5 years, there would be a huge revenue and potentially a huge cash flow stream. But then we had to wait for 3 to 5 years to sell the new license. Now in the cloud, the companies, the customers basically pay a monthly fee, which obviously leads to stable revenues and stable cash flows. The very opposite was a company that was basically building forest. Yes, the problem with forest is you basically need to grow them 30 years before you have revenue for the first time and you can sell wood for the first time. Yes, and the company basically tried to finance or bridge those 30 years with stock exchange financing, so issuing new equity. But after maybe 10 years, they failed and nobody believed in that business model anymore. And that's why the company failed, because the 30 year for waiting for the first revenue and the first cash flows was just too much. Another positive example, or rather positive example, would be those season tickets. So again, that's the idea that a winter resort sells season tickets in October the year before, which basically means that it already knows how much cash flow, how much revenue it will have. In contrast, we have ski resorts that try to increase the price depending on things like sun, snow condition, and so on. And therefore, the ski resort doesn't really know how many sunny days they will have or how much snow there will be this year. Yes, and therefore they have no idea how many times they can increase the price by 30%. And therefore, I would argue that this model is a little bit vague. Again, they might decide that they can have an insurance for sunny days or insurance for snow, which would then again level out these volatilities in revenues and cash flows. Nevertheless, I believe the left example, selling seasonal cards well in advance, leads to a more predictable cash flow and profit situation than selling higher price ticket depending on outside conditions. Last but not least, I would actually like to look at basically the developing of music industry. In 2000, we had something called Napster, which was a platform to uh, illegally exchange music. That was illegal, and Napster actually was taken to court and had to stop their uh, yes business. Then we had Sony Music and Apple iTunes, which was the first time that you can legally buy uh, songs, single songs, digitally. That was a huge step forward. So they basically made Napster legal, but despite their initial invention, they were overrun by Spotify, which, as we all know, has a very different method to provide music again. And as we can see, uh, the technology of digital music developed from basically no cash flow and no revenue, no profit, Napster, to a very stable or people, great ideas moved the music industry from no cash flow, no profits to Spotify, which has quite stable or very stable cash flows as well as revenues and profits. The next aspect to look at is the revenue model and cost model. Again, we have positive example and not so positive example. I would like to start with a positive example, which would be Ryanair. As we all know, Ryanair is very cheap. Flights with Ryanairs are really, really low priced, but again, the level of service is very minimal. The seats are very simple, so the cost model behind this business model is actually also quite simple, which basically means the revenue and the cost model do match very, very nicely. The exact opposite from a model perspective are luxury watches, but again, the actual models they work. Yes, so they have very expensive advertising with very famous people, VIPs, but they turn their business model or their value creation into very high priced items, the watches. So they have very high revenues at very high cost. Again, the model actually matches really, really well. On the opposite side, we have, for instance, Quelle, which was a mail order company. And mail order companies, all of them face the same problem worldwide, which is people ordered multiple items and sent all the items back which didn't fit. And their cost model was just not, or their business processes were not made to deal with returns. So the cost model for returns was way too high for the actual revenue model that they had. Similarly, for Thomas Cook, a travel agency that went bankrupt in 2019, it was a great model, a revenue cost model, but with people having the opportunity to book online and get information about trips or even arrange their trips with the internet themselves, the cost model of Thomas Cook was too high compared with the revenue what the customer were willing to sell. Then we have in between companies like Zalando or Tesla, which have very, very different cost model revenue models. And I believe for both companies, as of today, we don't really know how that works out. For instance, for Tesla, of course, the cars are initially quite expensive. Nevertheless, if the cars really last 3 times as long as a traditional car, what are the future revenues of Tesla? Then we have Google and Alphabet. Google is a daughter company of Alphabet, of course. And it's a little bit arguable, but overall, I believe that Google has a very, very good revenue model with advertising. and of course there is a lot of cost associated with data collection. But for Google search, the cost model and the revenue model, they do match. For most other activities of Alphabet, which include Waymo or Nest, home heating systems, I don't see the cost and revenue model work that well. And as a matter of fact, Alphabet has discontinued many of the other services. So for Google, they managed to have this great balance between the cost model and the revenue model. For most of the other ventures, it's a little bit more difficult to argue. Samsung is one of the companies that has been able to kind of retain a new balance all the time. Here the question might be how long they can do it. Yes, for many years they have been more on a copy follow-up basis. Yes, lately they also have invented like new aspects, new product features, but nevertheless Samsung is one of the company where they have to reiterate their revenue model constantly to make sure that their cost model, which is under pressure, is actually not getting too far away from the revenue model. Now we could also go back to our technologies again, what we discussed before. And here, as a trend, we would now argue differently and basically say, how can we observe if we are at that place? How can we observe if there is a new technology, LCD, that will basically disrupt our technology? Yes. Or here we can basically say, how can we successfully introduce automation, mass production, so we can actually sell more items, which is required. Selling more items is required to reach the new break-even point. Again, what have been examples that have been successful? What have been examples that have not been successful? What can we learn from them? Here, how can we ride the learning curve? How can we innovate faster so our employees do actually ride the learning curve faster and we can benefit from these cost cuttings faster than we would? What are positive examples? What are negative examples? Also for bigger changes in the industry, understanding what have companies done to maybe provoke such industry changes. Maybe we can talk about Apple, which together with the iPhones have introduced so many things like the new glass that we can use with the finger app, which was a very different method of programming computers than before. They invented the whole ecosystem, making sure that the new product iPhone could actually be used by the customers. And last but not least, in our cycle model, again, we could argue that maybe a company must come from a promotion-oriented marketing approach to a more product feature marketing approach. And there we could try to understand how have other companies done that successfully and what can we learn from them. I know that production is a little bit difficult for business people, but nevertheless, there are a lot of things that we can actually learn and apply for certain cases, at least for certain cases. Positive examples would be the introduction of the production belt by Ford. Yes, and again, it wasn't the first production belt, but he actually made the engine so simple that it can be used together with the production belt. At the same time, this is also a negative example because Ford failed to see what other car companies innovated and apply these innovations to the production belt. So he liked his production belt so much that he did hang on to it too long and always went out of business. Then another very positive example would be Tesla. because Tesla basically developed their production technologies in two directions. The first direction is they started with the Roadster, and every Roadster was basically handmade, which allowed them to develop the technology, improve batteries, improve engines, electric vehicles in general. As a next step, they introduced the Model S, the middle car, which was a luxury, high-priced car. So they can basically serve every customer individually, but it allowed them to test certain elements of mass production. And with these two components, they now are in the market of the Model 3. That's the lowest picture, which is basically a mass market product that they now successfully have brought to the market. On the second axis, Tesla has also innovated with the related product. For instance, in the middle, that's the Gigafactory, so battery production. And the right picture, that's the production belt, because they needed a new production belt very, very fast. So they set up a tent, which is much faster than a building, and they had the production belt in that tent. They also innovated that there was a slope in the production belt, so there wasn't any issue with the weight of the battery and so on. So alongside the actual product, they also try to innovate along the production technology to make sure that they can move forward fast enough. Last but not least, Bally. It was a shoe company in Switzerland. The brand exists, the company does not. Here, the main problem was that they did hang on to Swiss production for too long, and they didn't see how fast cheaper production abroad in Eastern Europe, in Asia, would basically reshape the market for shoes. Now, with these insights, we conclude the broad analysis, and important, we look at similar aspects as in the data collection, but we basically take a further look out. We open our minds a little bit. We look at other trends, other industries, other customers, other technologies, and how they could become relevant for our market. And this also concludes part 1 of our introduction, and stay tuned for the part 2, which you will find on the right hand side.